Welcome to the Charge Forward Podcast. I'm your host, Jim Cripps, coming to you from Hit Lab Studios here in Nashville, Tennessee. Joining me in the studio today is my dad, James Cripps. Thanks for joining me in the studio.
Sure.
So, your background is random. Raised here in Nashville, then went into the military, and then went to work as a mechanic,
Right.
then opened your own company.
Well, first I was a produce manager for H.G. Hill Company, then a mechanic again, and then opened my own company, Custom Wood Products.
And then, due to a heart attack,
2 heart attacks, pacemaker defibrillator. I'm on number 5 now. Heart surgery, bypass surgery. In 2020, I had to be reconstructed from my knees to my navel. Was given 4% chance to make it through the operation and 12% to make it another 90 days. But here I am.
that's right. Well, I think just about any of the segments of your life, I think, are interesting. But when you push them all together, they're really interesting in that. So you retire from Exxon as a mechanic. Well, let's back up even before that. So in the military, you get kind of picked one day in order to be the driver for the general, and then the general wants you to keep driving for him.
Right. I was selected as the driver of the Deputy Commanding General, Fort Gordon, Georgia. For unknown reasons, I have no idea why he picked me to be his driver. I was a lowly private. That was a job for an E6 or E7. So the next day, the motor sergeant substituted somebody else to drive for him, and he sent that guy back and requested that I be his permanent driver.
And then when he retired,
he wanted to know what I wanted to do. I said I have no idea, because the new general taking his place was bringing his own driver with him. So he had me appointed as a game warden because he knew I liked to hunt and fish. It was a really good job. It was. I can't say it was an easy job. There was a lot of responsibility, a lot of risk. Had a shotgun stuck in my navel once. All the guy had to do was pull the trigger. It was a good time mixed with some bad times, but it put me on the road for the rest of my life.
right? And crazy how it would come back kind of full circle again, because you leave the military, you go to Exxon. 15 years at Exxon, was it?
16 years with Exxon. They eliminated my job in auto mechanic. They decided they were going to close all of those stores where we worked on automobiles and open up C-stores. So we all had to find something else to do, and I went into business for myself as a furniture maker. Didn't know a lot about building furniture, but I ended up building furniture for some very prominent people, music people, doctors. When I had the heart attack, I had 5 doctors walk in. I couldn't open my eyes, but I recognized every one of them's voice because they were my customers.
That's right. Yeah, and I mean, really back then it was kind of the who's who of either medical care or country music that you were working for.
Well, the type work that I did, that you actually assisted me, there was no competition.
Right.
We did quality work, we did custom work. It's a lost trade now. I can't even recommend anybody to build you a custom piece of furniture anymore.
Yeah. And some of the ones that stick out for me is, a big project for Billy Ray Cyrus, and then the desk units for Vince Gill, and a lot of work for Stephen Curtis Chapman.
Yes. Stephen Curtis Chapman was one of my favorite customers. He had a beautiful, wonderful wife. She knew exactly what she wanted. She hired decorators. Uh, Most of the work came straight out of my head. They had a plan. They knew how to get it across to me, and we just built their furniture.
Yeah. And they were great to work with.
Did some work for Jenny C. Riley. Never forget that.
Yeah.
A lot of the country music stars. They're wonderful people as a whole.
Yeah. And easy. Most of them were easy to work with.
Real easy to work with. Particular people, but then you charge because you know you're working to do a particular job in a particular way, or you're not going to get paid. So it's that simple. They can be as particular as they want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, fast forward a little bit. So we're in 1997 at your birthday, and you have a double heart attack.
Well, back then I played music. That particular night I was playing guitar, playing harmonica, and singing.
Mm-hmm.
And I started getting a aching in my tongue, actually. I just kept blowing that harmonica. It went down, the pain went down my throat and into my back. I just kept playing, kept singing. And it turned out to be a full-blown heart attack. I had to be rushed to the hospital. Had open heart surgery. Well, that night I had a stent, then ended up with open heart surgery. A little while later, a pacemaker defibrillator. Like I say, still going.
Yeah. Well, and then if we circle that back, I think a couple things happened right in that moment. You contacted VA to see if there were any benefits available about the same time you were in the hospital, and you got told no. Is that?
Back in the day, when we E-test out of the service, I actually flew back in from overseas assignment in Heidelberg, Germany. But we went into Fort Dix, New Jersey, and they announced at about noon when we flew in that they were going to get everybody on a plane on their way home unless anybody wanted to claim a service-connected disability, and if anybody did, we wouldn't make it home till Monday. So nobody raised their hand as wanting to apply for a service-connected disability. We wanted to go home. So we were given a piece of paper and were told verbally that we would be taken care of for the rest of our life, our medical care. Go sign up for unemployment until you can find a job, which I did. When I had the heart attack, I did call after the heart attack to see if I had any medical coverage. And they said, no, you have no benefits coming. I only served 3 years.
Yeah. And it turns out that was a lie.
As it turns out, that was a lie. And that was actually back in President Reagan was the first to recognize that, hey, these guys serve the country. We made a promise. It's about time we start keeping our promise. And we got our medical care that we had coming all along. Mm-hmm. In 2003, I learned not only did I have medical care, but I could file for service connection for any disability that was caused by my military service. And I actually did that. I found out while I was a game warden, I was involved in the testing phase of Agent Orange there at Fort Gordon. They came in from Fort Drum and did some testing. I was ordered to aid them in any way that I could and work along with them in forestry. When they finished the testing with a Bell G2 helicopter. The product, Agent Orange, Agent Blue, and Agent White, came in 55-gallon drums, and they didn't use it all. For instance, Agent Blue, they only used 2 gallons. That left 53 gallons. Something had to happen with that 53 gallons. As the low man on the totem pole in Fish and Game, it was up to me to use that herbicide up. To me, it was a weed killer. It didn't even have the name Agent Orange back then. It was just a herbicide, 2,4-D, 2,4,5-T. Meant nothing. I sprayed in my shirt sleeves. It's the deadliest poison known to man. And it's tried to kill me several times, and it's still chipping away. Eventually it'll win, but I fight it every day.
That's right. Well, and, one of the things that stick out in my mind is, not only did they lie about whether or not you had benefits you could have applied for back in 97, but once you did file, because it was classified that was used in the United States, that was not public knowledge, and they said, you're never going to win this.
Well, it's funny how things happen. Since I got out of the military, I've had acne, really, really bad acne. My face, my back, my ears. And I saw on the internet one night, I learned to use the internet. Without the internet, I never would have went anywhere. But I saw, I'd tell my wife, look at me, I'm 55 years old and I've still got acne. I don't understand this. But I happened to see one night on the internet the word chloracne. I never heard that word before, but it was interesting because it had the word acne in it, and I looked it up. And it's an acne-form disease that resembles teenage acne, but it never goes away. And it's, 50 times worse than teenage acne. The only way that you can get chloracne is by dioxin exposure. Dioxin is a byproduct in the Agent Orange, and like I say, it's the most toxic chemical known to man. It's known as fat-loving and water-fearing, meaning when it gets in water, it seeks out fat, so it goes to the fish. So the minnow absorbs the dioxin. In turn, that minnow is eaten by the bigger fish and right on up the line until me, the human, who was fishing in those lakes after I sprayed, ate those bigger fish, transferred to me as fat-loving. Then it goes to the fat in my spine, and then it fizzes to the surface over your lifetime, causing the chloracne. The U.S. government, when I realized what had actually happened to me and caused all of my problems from my heart attack, and I filed a claim with the U.S. government, but the U.S. government tells me we have never, ever sprayed Agent Orange in the continental United States, period. Well, I knew that wasn't so. I wasn't about to fall for that. And you can't be made a liar. You have to stand up, and you have to prove it.
Right.
If you say it, you have to back it up. And I set out to do that. It's been a lifetime challenge.
Well, one of the things, as your son, seeing this unfold over the last, it's been 25 years, just that part, you've become a different person. Not that your core values haven't changed, but you had to become something different in order to take on the government and prove this.
Well, I can look back, and I was an easygoing let's cause no trouble. Let's get along. But I had to abandon that, and I had to learn how to be tenacious. I had to learn how to fight for myself. Let the hair stand up on your back. If you see something that's wrong and not right, then you stand up for it. You fight for it. You be tenacious. You research it. You do whatever it takes. I did eventually win that claim. I proved that it was used in the United States and that I had sprayed it, which has also led to other veterans getting their benefits. But I won that claim, and I told the VA I won that claim because I didn't sleep. You did. While you were sleeping, I was researching, and I've proven my point.
Well, you even, you collected a lot of data points from all over the United States. What I mean by that is you had experts that would weigh in as to the half-life and how toxic Agent Orange was, so that when you proved that they did use it, you could also prove that it hadn't gone away.
Yes, it's known to last 100 years. And the government knows that. They still tell you that they just don't want to talk about it right now. We're digging up the soil in Da Nang. After all of these years, since 70 years since the Vietnam War, and we're digging up the soil and heating it up to a certain temperature to get rid of the dioxin, and then putting it back. We're spending billions of dollars. The aircraft that were used in the spraying in Vietnam, those aircraft, when they finished with them, were flown back to the United States and given to National Guard and Reserve units. Now, if you can show that you were a Reserve member or active or National Guard member, and you had anything to do with those planes after they were returned back to the United States, all of these years later, then you're presumed to have been exposed to Agent Orange because of the residuals that's still in those airplanes.
And that's just the residual. That's not somebody spraying it with a backpack sprayer, getting covered in it day after day.
Yeah, it was my job to use that up. I would let my detail men out in the morning. I opened a chain of 13 lakes, and managed those. At daylight, I was standing there with my fatigue shirt, my military shirt off, with a backpack sprayer strapped on my back, waiting for daylight. And I would spray maybe an hour until fishermen started coming in. I didn't want to be, not because I thought it was toxic, because I didn't want to disturb the fishermen.
Right.
And I took my shirt off because the stuff is sticky. I didn't want my shirt smelling like that. It smells like diesel. It's mixed with diesel fuel. So I would spray in my T-shirt. When I get finished spraying, I'd take my T-shirt off, put my fatigue shirt back on, wash my hands and arms in the lake. I was set to go for the rest of the day. So, I didn't know it was dangerous. I had no idea what I was spraying. It was a weed killer. It was a job I had to perform. I never questioned it. I couldn't question it. You follow orders. It killed everything it come into contact with, and I'm talking about weeds, vines, broadleaf herbicide. Didn't bother the pine trees because it was broadleaf. Everything else died, and I mean coons, deer, possums. I'd see those things. Still, I never put together how deadly this stuff was.
Yeah. Well, and then, fast forward a little bit, back then, you guys were trying to have a family and didn't know that it was the dioxin that you'd absorbed into your skin. It was the reason y'all weren't having kids.
Well, we thought we would have children before I got out of the Army, specifically because we couldn't afford it, and we figured, if we had kids while we were in the military, there would be no medical bills. Uh, but the half life of dioxin is somewhere around 9-10 years. Uh, and that's the time it takes the human body to get rid of half of the toxin. So you weren't born till 10 years later.
Right.
Sure, it affected.
I'd be 10 years older.
I'd be 10 years younger, maybe.
Yeah, right. Well, and then, it's almost, I consider it almost lucky as your son that direct exposure and indirect exposure work differently, because you've got a lot of friends that were indirectly exposed in Vietnam, and their children have birth defects.
That's true. It's not something you really want to think about. You can do your own research on that and see what percent of the population, cleft palate, born without limbs, born without eyes. The Vietnamese people have suffered greatly, but our own troops and their children, it's passed to our children. It's almost killed my daughter twice now.
Yeah.
I'm still worried about what's going to happen to my daughter. It seemed to have skipped you so far.
Right.
But then
You don't know.
you don't know. You've got the rest of your life to live. It took a long time for it to catch up with me. It took 20 some odd years to catch up with my daughter, Mandy.
And the first time, 20 years ago this year, she was minutes from death.
Right. I was wondering where I was going to bury my daughter.
Right.
And the shame of it is, you tend to think the government didn't know. But I have a letter that was written by a German chemical company to Dow Chemical in 1953. And it says, all of our people who are working with Agent Orange are coming down with chloracne. And we have found out that if you will boil it at a higher temperature for so much longer, then it boils off the toxin. Dow Chemical Monsanto, the chemical companies here, decided not to do that because they wanted to keep the price at $10 a gallon.
Well, and I was hoping you were going to bring that one up, because that's one that sticks out in my brain as the government and Dow Chemical, they knew about it. They knew that it could be fixed, and they chose to endanger and destroy lives.
The guy that was in charge of all of the spraying in Vietnam, Admiral Zumwalt Jr., claimed to know that he knew where every drop was used. In other words, he had complete control, which that's a fallacy.
Right.
He had no idea where all that herbicides went. They were called rainbow herbicide. You had pink, blue, orange, white. But his son was Brown Water Navy. Brown Water Navy meant they went up the rivers. His son was involved in the spraying in the Brown Water Navy, and it actually killed his son.
Mm-hmm.
The Admiral was pro Agent Orange until that event. The Admiral made the statement before Congress after his son died. We actually knew that it was harmful, and we actually knew that we might be spraying our troops. But had we sprayed our troops, we knew our government would take care of them. Well, we know how that turned out.
Right. Well, and it seems like, as the fight continues, veterans, a lot of veterans, especially of that era, have passed. More and more pass each year. And it seems like every once in a while they'll include a new group. They'll include a new group. They'll include a new group. Like somebody has pushed hard enough for long enough. Like, was it Blue Water Navy that was one of the ones that was recently added, or just a couple years ago?
Yeah, as it started out, we came from the DOD put their finger in my face and they said, Mr. Cripps, we have never, ever sprayed Agent Orange in the continental United States. Well, we now know I won the very first case of Agent Orange exposure inside the continental United States because I proved that it was used. I got the aircraft tail number, the pilot's name, who they leased the helicopter from, how many gallons they were spraying. The helicopter had 2 booms, each boom being 26, each one having 6 nozzles. Each nozzle was set on 3. I know how many gallons of each agent. I know the exact strips. They were making 50-foot swaths. There's no question about that now. But then finally they had to recognize, well, maybe you were involved in the testing of in the continental United States. And then it kind of over time, when they couldn't avoid it anymore, it got stretched a little bit more. We won a case at Fort McClellan. Then we won another one down at Eglin Air Force Base. We won at Fort Chaffee, Arkansas. And now they're finally coming forward in the last year. Well, maybe we used it at Johnson's Atoll, and maybe Guam, and maybe we did use it in Laos and Cambodia. And if you were in Thailand at any military base, yeah, I guess we use it. It's finally breaking open, but what about all the veterans that died?
And the lives
because
that
they didn't know they were exposed, so they couldn't seek medical help. And what about all of their wives? They couldn't draw their dependency, and it's just I don't know what you would call it, but it's a shame. It can never be corrected.
Yeah, and it was damage that can't be undone.
It can't be undone. You can come back and you can compensate a wife 20 years after her husband died of dioxin exposure. But what does that do?
Yeah.
She missed 20 years. What about the children? What about my daughter? What about her children?
Mm-hmm.
There's a professor at Vanderbilt. She was our guest speaker at one of our meetings. They can't perform these tests on humans. So they have to use rats. In a rat, the birth cycle is so quick that, they can start with 2 parent rats, and a year later they're working on great-grandparent rats, So they take a female rat, and the rate of birth and birth defects rise 50% after she's exposed to dioxin and conceives. So then they get to thinking about the male rat. So they expose a male rat to the dioxin. Same thing happens with a female that hadn't been exposed. So then they come back and they expose a female rat and they expose the male rat and they mate them. There was no reproduction, period, ever. They could not reproduce. That tells you something right there.
Oh, yeah. Well, kind of branching off of that, so after you, and correct me if I'm wrong here, I think your proof to win, to prove that there was exposure inside the United States, that they had in fact sprayed Agent Orange and that all these things were classified in lies was over 200 pounds, 200 pounds of pieces of paper in order to win that case.
Oh gosh, I've got two four drawer file cabinets full.
Yeah.
My C file, a year after I made application for my benefits, I got a copy of that. It weighed 19 pounds. They mailed it, so it was weighed, and that was in the first year. It took me 20. I've been fighting the VA 20 years.
And how many years did it take to win, to actually prove it? The first round.
5.
5 years.
You know, nobody ever thought that claim could be won because the government said it hadn't been used in the United States, and everybody believes the government. You know, we were taught in the school, our government don't do things like that. So back then everything was paper. Everything now is digital. It's been put on disk. You know, all my files are on one disk. But back then, Philadelphia regional office is in a tall multi-story building. It had so many records in it, they had to move them out because it was destroying the building. The building was falling in.
Because of the weight of the files.
Because of the weight of the files. It was paper files back then. I still have my records. I'll never get rid of them because I don't trust the VA.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I just don't.
They could have a fire. They could delete digital records. They could do all kinds of things.
You know, I went from not having any benefits to right now, no veteran of any era, of any service, has ever been paid a higher benefit rate than I draw.
And there's only a handful of R2s in the world, right?
In the world. In the state of Tennessee, I know of 3, and I was personally involved in their cases. Not that there are only 3, but I would say there's not over 5.
Yeah. Well, and after you won yours, not only did other people get to use your evidence or your case as proof in theirs, because when you proved that they had used it, I think you overwhelmed them to a certain extent because they actually admitted to things you didn't even accuse them of. Using the other agents.
Yeah, because they really actually didn't know what I had. So better to fess up than to get caught in the crossfire.
Yeah,
so to say. But yeah, they're finally coming forth a little more and a little more, admitting more. And I know it's costly, but that's the cost of war.
Yeah.
You know, we were expendable. We were not a nation of complainers. Had I known the trouble that the dioxin was going to cause me in later life, I couldn't have said, no, I'm not going to spray this stuff.
Yeah.
I didn't have that option. I was expendable.
That's
we
right.
were in a dangerous business, and that was part of the danger.
And then, everybody gets stateside. They think they're going to be taken care of. And then, one of the things that I find interesting that, I would have never even thought of is a lot of veterans, they don't even want to talk about it. They don't even want to talk about the fact that they were in or they have ailments. A lot of them don't file for benefits. It's not even a thing. And then you've worked for now going on 20 years, not only working on your own, but at the same time, once you figured out how the system worked, now over the last 20 years, you've helped a lot of other veterans get their benefits.
Right. When we came home, we were known as baby killers. Actually, I was standing leaning against the wall in Columbus, Georgia at the train station waiting on my train. And a young lady walked up and spit on my medals, called me a baby killer. Uh,
And you're just a 21-year-old trying to get home, trying to
19.
19.
Uh, Now I look back and I think, how did she know?
Mm.
Because with my sprayer, I don't doubt that I didn't harm some kids. You know, it's just as deadly to kids.
Right.
I would do my spraying and come back through, and there would be fishermen there, their kids playing at a picnic table that I had just sprayed. So, yeah, I don't doubt that I inadvertently caused some harm. But we came home, we snuck home during the night. We took our uniforms off, we threw them away. I actually worked with another veteran for 10 years and never knew he was a veteran, and he didn't know that I was a veteran. He was in the Navy, I was in the Army. You didn't talk about those things. But now, actually, we rode in on the backs of the post 9/11 veterans to get our benefits. We came home as baby killers. They came home as heroes. We actually used, we rode in on their backs, and we got noticed. Maybe we did do something for our country after all, after all these years. So, yeah, we didn't seek our benefits because we didn't want anybody to know that we were veterans.
Right.
We didn't want to be known as baby killers. And that was a political war. You didn't fight that war to beat the Vietnamese. You fought to protect your buddy. That was your reason for fighting. You protected each other. Those people never did anything to us,
Right. Well, and then, even when, let's just say, fast forward and you've got your benefits, you're helping other people get their benefits, even in our own county, Cheatham County being one of only 2 counties in the state of Tennessee with no veteran service officer.
When I started out, yes, we had no veteran service officer. I was headed up, going to the commission and fighting to get the money appropriated to get a veteran service office. We had to load up on Tuesday mornings after breakfast, go into Davidson County to see a service officer to file for benefits. They resented us being there because we were from out of county, and they would actually make us line up on a couch so they got damn good and ready to see us. So, yeah, we fought to get a service officer. That's coming back to haunt me.
Well, I'm just going to say the thing that a lot of people don't want to say is there are some good service officers out there, and there are a lot that just want the veteran out of their way, out of their office, and they halfway do it. They give them bad advice. They tell them once you get to 100%, you stop. Don't poke the bear. And how many levels are there above 100%?
There are 12.
12 levels. And, you've got veterans. What would you say is the average amount of time it takes a veteran that doesn't know how to work the system, that just goes in and files their claim, from the time they file their claim to the time that it gets approved?
If it's a simple claim that's not going to pay a lot of money, 6 to 9 months. If it's a complicated claim, 10 years.
Yeah. That's a long time for somebody to potentially pass away. And then it's even dirtier than that, in that the wife or the spouse can sign on to the claim, but they only have how many days after the veteran passes away?
Best I remember, about 90 days to sign on, uh, in which they remove the veteran's name after they're deceased, insert the wife's name in case there are any accrued benefits. A case is finally won, then she would get the money in place of the veteran.
Right.
But, I approached a service officer, our service officer, yesterday because she was discouraging veterans from filing claims. So I nicely, I said, things are not going right here. You're telling a veteran if he's 100%, they might take something away from you if you file this additional claim. She said, yeah, that's right. I said, that's not right. How are they ever going to get to the upper levels? There's 12 more levels above that if they don't file another claim. She said, I have been instructed if a veteran is 100%, unless it's life-threatening, do not file another claim for him.
Oh my God, that is terrible.
I have been instructed that your organization is not recognized by the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. So I have been instructed not to deal with you or anybody in your organization.
It's still happening. They're still trying to cover it up.
I could not believe that in this day and time to be so biased as to single. We got over 100 people in our organization. United States Veterans Alliance, been meeting ever since 2010. If you belong to the United States Veterans Alliance, I'm not filing your claim.
The thing that I find, I'm not even going to say funny. It's not funny. So she wouldn't have a job. That position
had it not been for me.
That's right. If you hadn't pushed so hard, and what really just irks me is, you went down and you said, look, if veterans get their benefits here in Cheatham County, they're going to spend money here. There is a tax benefit to the county. This is not going to cost you anything. And if we fast forward now a decade later, there's still that bias. She's part of it now. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you're the veteran service officer, you need to do better.
No, she won't have a job before long.
Your own notice. You heard it here.
Your own notice.
But after all that, what I also think about is how many millions of dollars. Okay, we're not talking about free money. We're talking about benefits that these veterans were owed for the damage that was done to them and their family and their lives, that those veterans are now that are at 100% or 90% or have letter awards that are getting, and that money's being spent in the county, so the county benefits, and yet still there's this bias.
Well, the first of the month, the veterans get paid their benefits. That money comes into the county.
Mm-hmm.
And it bounces 8 or 10 times in the county before it ever leaves the county. Because I spend it in the county at the barber shop, and then the barber buys barber clippers, it bounces again. He pays his electric bill and he pays his taxes, it bounces again. He buys his car tags, he buys a new car.
Or even when you put it in the bank, which is a local bank, it's still benefiting the county, it's still benefiting the people here, and yet they still have this crazy amount of bias toward the people that made it happen.
There is a certain amount of jealousy in a veteran getting his benefits, but what you got to realize, when I was in the service, they paid me $87 a month. Can you imagine trying to survive? Now they make good money available to us. We made $87 a month. And then when we were broke, we couldn't borrow any money from anybody. Everybody else we knew were broke. We got paid once a month. If we were broke, everybody else we knew were broke. And then we went without any benefits for 50 years.
Right.
So it's when you consider that, look how much better time me and you, could have had with a little extra money. We always had what we needed, but we couldn't afford anything we wanted. I could have helped with your education. We could have had insurance. Life could have been so much better had I been given the benefits that I earned and actually had all this time and didn't know it.
Well, I think even I would go back to '97 when you had the heart attack, and you called and asked if you had benefits, and there was a presumptive, I think, that ended that year. So when they told you no, basically it just pushed you off till after you couldn't file or would have to go prove that the government lied about spraying Agent Orange in the United States.
Well, I couldn't go back to work for more than 9 months. And we didn't have a lot, and I went down to see if I could get food stamps. Well, when I got out of the Army, I had $10,000 worth of insurance, and you can elect to pick up payments and keep that insurance, which I did. It was a $10,000 policy. The lady at the food stamp place said, "Mr. Cripps, I said, all I need is something to help me get on my feet till I can go back to work. I've had a heart attack. I got stitches." She said, "Mr. Cripps, you've got an insurance policy worth $10,000. I said, "Yes, ma'am." Had a cash value of maybe, I don't know, $1,500. She said, "You go sell that insurance policy, spend the money, come back, and maybe we can help you." I said, "Lady, I've had a heart attack. Nobody will insure me again. I can't buy no more insurance. I can't sell this policy." She said, "Sorry."
Yeah.
I made it the 9 months.
And went back to work.
Went back to work, worked 2 more years. Then I had to have the pacemaker defibrillator. Was cardioverted with the paddle 16 times. That was a rough period. Trying to work when you couldn't work.
Well, and two, you were using saws, you were around heavy machinery, those types of things. One slip up, and
it's over.
And it's over.
Yeah.
Or you've cut a limb off, you've cut even a finger off, and there's no insurance to cover that.
But you got a family to feed. You got responsibilities. No matter your medical condition, you've got to provide somehow for your family. You had to have milk, you had to have diapers, you had to have no matter what. So you work, you push through, you persevere, you don't quit. We're not quitters. We're winners.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, and, I think one of the things that, I started this conversation saying that your background was, random or however you want to look at it. As your son, I see this evolving. Like you evolved, and yes, when I was a young man, you were strong, but you were passive for the most part. Meaning, as long as it wasn't somebody hurting our family, there was no reason to get involved. There's no reason to raise much ruckus. And then you open your own company. You get stronger there. You build something. You have this reputation. Fast forward, then you have the heart attacks. You get knocked down. You choose to charge forward because everybody's hitting you. Everybody's trying to keep you down. Everybody's trying to tell you no. You don't accept no for an answer because you know that the truth is different. And so you push forward, you get your benefits. Then you start helping other veterans get their benefits. We won't name names here, but, I remember a family that was days away from foreclosure on their family farm. And as a last-ditch effort, they reach out to you, and just, I don't even want to say hours, it was just before the foreclosure, he wins his case that had been out there 7, 8, 9, 10 years.
Yeah.
They saved the family farm. He passes a couple years later, but she's taken care of. That whole family tree is different because of what you went through, because of what you had to push through, because you would not back down and you were set to prove the truth. And then once you proved it, you helped others have hope and help others improve their lives.
You know, when you're fighting the United States government and a large entity like the Veterans Affairs, you got to get smart. You got to have a plan. You got to get it figured out. So nobody having ever done this before, there was nobody to talk to. There was nobody that believed in my case. Nobody to get instruction from. You're a first. You're the spearhead. You're the point. So, I learned that the veteran service officers were taught by the state. The state trained the veteran service officers. I learned that anybody could attend the service officers training. So I did. Almost 20 years I went to service officer training with the state service officers. When they send out invitation for training, right now today, it goes to all of the service officers in all of the counties of Tennessee and to James M. Cripps.
I love it. I absolutely love it.
But I was actually a Trojan horse. I went to learn how to win my case. In doing so, I learned how to win everybody else's case. So, it would make sense when I won my case, and I'm done. There's nothing else to win but a burial flag. There's no higher award to go after. I've got it all. It would make real good sense for me to sit back, stop fighting, and enjoy what I've earned. But I can't do that. I know too much. I see too many veterans that don't know the same thing that I didn't know, and I've got to help them.
Right.
You know, I've got to give. Information is all I've got to give, but I have a monumental amount of information. You know, their hard claims are just a speed bump to me because I educated myself. I did the research. I went to the service officers training. I actually went to one training class. It's 5 days, 5 days. At the end of the class on Friday, they give you a test. When you go back for the next service officers training, they pull those test results and hand them out to you. The director of claims handed out the test, and he said, "Cripps, you cheated." I said, "What do you mean I cheated?" He said, "You made 100. I didn't even make that." I said, "Roger, it was an open book test." So, you know.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think next time I have you on, I want us to walk through what a veteran should do, what somebody out there that's listening that maybe is fighting for their benefits or hasn't even filed yet. You know, because correct me if I'm wrong, that to file it, it's a 26-page form.
Used to be.
Okay.
We got that cut down some because it was too complicated. A veteran couldn't do that.
It was designed that way, though. It was designed to keep them from filing.
You know, the Code of Federal Regulations is it controls veterans' benefits. That's the laws and regulations. Every year, the service officers got a new set. They were $118. I didn't have $118. But when they got a new set, I asked for their old ones. And I kept one by my crapper.
Yeah.
And every time I had to take a crap, I'd sit there and read that Code of Federal Regulations. So every time I took a crap, I got a little smarter. And in 20 years, you take a lot of crap and you read a lot of...
I believe it. I believe it.
But that's VA the Redneck Way.
And that's your website.
That is my way, vatheredneckway.com. A lot of information on there, a lot about me, a lot about how to win benefits. VA the Redneck Way.
Okay.
VAtheredneckway.com. Information's there. My contact information's there. You might want to look at it. The VA does.
Right. Well, Dad, I appreciate you joining me in the studio today. And thank you for just teaching me, leading me. I mean, it's an example that most don't get to witness. And, from the bottom of my heart, you've just gotten stronger and stronger the more years you put on this earth. And today you help so many people. You've changed so many lives and impacted so many families. It's just impressive. So thank you.
It's my duty. It gets into your blood, and that's just what you got to do.
There you go. Well, team, you heard it here on the Charge Forward podcast. I want to say special thanks to our sponsors, Hit Lab Studios, Sense Custom Development, and Charge Forward Solutions. Until next time, charge forward. Team, thanks so much for joining us for this episode of the Charge Forward podcast. Look forward to other amazing guests, and until next time, I'm your host, Jim Cripps. Special thanks, as always, to Nick Hyder and the creative team at Hit Lab Studios here in Nashville, Tennessee. Special thanks to our sponsors, Sense Custom Development and Charge Forward Solutions. Please be sure to like and subscribe.